The 2000s were a transformative decade for horror, shaped by post 9/11 anxiety, rapid technological change, and shifting audience expectations. Horror films during this era often leaned into themes of paranoia, loss of control, moral consequence, and societal collapse, reflecting a growing sense of unease in the real world. Visually, many movies favored cold color palettes, gritty textures, and handheld or documentary style camera work, especially as digital filmmaking became more accessible. The decade also saw the rise of found footage, the boom of remakes and reboots, and the controversial popularity of extreme or torture horror, while international influences, particularly Japanese and French horror, significantly reshaped Western storytelling. Overall, 2000s horror balanced raw intensity with experimentation, laying the groundwork for many modern horror trends we see today. And in this video, we're going to cover some of the most notable horror movies from each year from 2000 to 2009 and really explain how some of these horror movies really impacted the horror genre in the 2000s and made it as we know it to be today. All right, spooky gang. So kicking off the 2000s, we already start off with a banger in the movie Final Destination. Final Destination is a movie that turned death itself into a villain, with really innovative and inventive Rube Goldberg style kills. And it ended up launching into a long running franchise. And we can see that in even just as recently as last year with Final Destination Bloodlines, which was a really good movie. The whole franchise as a whole is pretty solid, and it all started with the original, which was a great start to the 2000s. And you have a movie like American Psycho, which was iconically played by Christian Bale as Patrick Bateman. This movie is really sharp and satirical while also being really deep into the psychological horror elements. It's certainly one of the best horror movies of the 2000s. And then also in 2000, you have a movie like Ginger Snaps, which was a fresh take on a werewolf story with also having metaphors for puberty. And this movie almost instantly became a cult classic. And you move into 2001 and you have a movie like The Others. The Others is a real slow burn gothic ghost story horror movie with a legendary twist ending, one of the best twist endings in all of horror. And it certainly relies more on atmosphere than it does on, a lot of traditional jump scares. And then later on in 2000, you have a movie like Jeepers Creepers. And Jeepers Creepers is great in its own right. A lot of people love this movie. And it introduced a memorable monster into the horror genre with the creeper itself. And it did a good job of blending that road trip tension in horror with creature feature horror and a pretty iconic horror movie out of it. And then you also have a movie like Session 9, a real psychological horror movie that is set in an abandoned asylum. Really solid sound design, really good in terms of the realism aspect. Then we move into 2002 and we have one of my favorite horror movies of all time in The Ring. The Ring really popularized Japanese horror in the United States. The biggest thing that makes this movie so impactful is the iconic imagery and the deeply unsettling atmosphere. I mean, this movie is like the perfect movie to watch on a real foggy, gloomy, rainy day. Really, that's because all those same things happen in the movie itself. It rains almost the entire movie and it's just really gloomy. It's just like the definition of atmospheric horror. Also in 2002, you also get a movie like 28 Days Later. 28 Days Later really redefined the zombie genre. Finally really started getting more fast-paced zombies. So that really picks up the pace of the movie and adds to that level of urgency and trying to get away from them. Yeah, just a really gritty post-apocalyptic movie. And then you have a movie like Blade 2, which was a little bit of a difference from the original in terms of this movie being much darker and more horror related. And it's directed by Guillermo del Toro, and it's just a really solid sequel in the horror genre. Then rolls around 2003 and we have one of the best remakes of all time in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And the thing that makes this movie so effective is not only was the 1974 original great, but this movie really did a lot of the same things that made that movie great, but modernized it. It's just so brutal, so grimy, and it really helped kick off the remake boom of the 2000s. Then there's a movie like House of a Thousand Corpses, which is a Rob Zombie film, and it's just really chaotic, and it's a grindhouse style horror movie. It was sort of like a cult classic for the people who are into Rob Zombie's movies. Comes a movie like Wrong Turn, which revived the backwoods slasher type horror, and it leaned real hard into that survival terror. And for some people, it's good in its own right as well. Then comes around 2004, and we have the movie that's revered in Saw. Saw introduced the torture horror trend, but the thing that made this movie special is because of all of the twists and the mind bending and the connecting the dots, putting the pieces together, while also watching really graphic and really brutal deaths and things of that nature. So this movie is definitely a pioneer in that aspect. Then a movie that's a polar opposite, you have Shaun of the Dead, which was like a great blend of horror comedy, and it reinvigorated the zombie genre in a new way, especially in comparison to another movie that came out in 2004, Dawn of the Dead, which was a remake from the 1978 original. And like I said, because of a movie like 28 Days Later, this movie had fast-paced zombies, which helps with the pacing of the movie. It's easily one of the most respected horror movies and remakes specifically of the zombie horror genre. Then in 2005, you have a great film in The Descent, and this movie is claustrophobic horror at its finest. A lot of people have documented this as one of the scariest movies of all time. Would I necessarily say that? No, but the claustrophobia, the likability of the characters, and some of the things that happens story-wise in this movie just really elevates this movie and definitely makes it what I would consider probably a top 50 horror movie of all time. I feel pretty comfortable in saying that. And then comes a movie like Hostel, which I really enjoy. And this movie differs a little bit from Saw. It still keeps a lot of those same just really brutal and torture elements. Although this movie is a little more straightforward than in a movie like Saw, but this movie did spark a debate about exploitation versus commentary. So that was something that was pretty unique about it. And also still in 2005 comes another movie from Rob Zombie in The Devil's Rejects. Also a very gritty, nihilistic, it kind of blends horror with like a crime drama. For the people who enjoy the Rob Zombie movies, this is just like a great follow-up to House of a Thousand Corpses. Then in 2006, we had one of the most revered horror movies in Pan's Labyrinth, but this movie is also pretty niche. This movie is essentially like a dark fairy tale that sort of blends fantasy and horror together. You have a movie like The Hills Have Eyes remake. This also was really good, also pretty gritty and very brutal, very uncompromising. And then there's a movie like Slither, which was a B movie, and it was a really nice homage to our body horror that we love, balances out with some pretty solid humor in there as well. Then comes 2007, which is one of the most talked about horror movies, especially around the time, in Paranormal Activity. This movie revitalized the found footage horror subgenre, and it proved that low budget horror movies could still be really effective. I just remember at the time, because of the realism of the found footage, it seemed like the events that you were watching on screen actually happened. So a lot of the theater audiences that were watching this movie at the time were like really petrified because everything felt so real and so genuine. And that is a quality that can never be taken away from a movie that executes it at this level. Then you have a movie like Inside, which was a French film, which is also known for its relentless brutality. This movie is certainly a standout of all of the French horror movies. And then last but not least, in 2007, I can't go without mentioning a movie like 1408. 1408 is a banger movie. It's a psychological horror featured around isolation and really the curiosity of the beyond. So the paranormal, the ghost, and really trying to discover that with also some deeper story elements that really tie the movie all together very well. Great performances, and you have Samuel L. Jackson in it. I mean, hey, it's just a movie that you can't beat. And it's certainly one of the best Stephen King adaptations for sure. Then comes around 2008 with Let the Right One In. This was a really nice and emotional vampire story. I personally am a little bigger fan of the US version in Let Me In, but I have all the world of respect for this movie, and both are really top notch. And then in a lot of ways, it redefined what vampire horror looks like. Then you have the infamous The Strangers that also came out in 2008. This was home invasion horror that was like really rooted in realism. And the thing that really made this movie scary are the most iconic lines from the movie, and because you were home, and that's what real terror is about. Something special about when your antagonist or your villain or whatever it is going about killing for absolutely no reason. That adds a lot of value to it, because how the unconscious mind works. For somebody to just say, oh, I wanted to kill you just because I wanted to kill you, rather than them having some real concrete reason, that's terrifying. So that is something that really adds to this movie, and something that a lot of horror movies don't do. Then also in 2008, you have a movie like Cloverfield. Cloverfield brought that found footage monster horror. Then the last year of the 2000s with 2009, you have a movie like Drag Me to Hell. This movie is a Sam Raimi special, pretty over the top, but it does a really good job of blending in some really solid horror with dark comedy. And that's what, this type of movie is all about. You have another movie that I love that released in 2009 in The House of the Devil. And this is a Ty West directed film, just a really nice retro style, slow burn horror movie. And it felt like a real love letter to 80s satanic type horror movies. It honestly just makes you feel uncomfortable the entire movie. That's the best way I can put it. And lastly, for 2009, you have a movie like Orphan, which is different from pretty much every single movie that I listed on here. This is a real twisty psychological horror movie. This is one of those movies to me that definitely became more appreciated over time. But that is all I have, Spooky Gang. Y'all comment down below what you think of 2000s horror and what are some of your favorite movies from this decade. Considering we've already gone through the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and now with this video, the 2000s. And I think about the ranking of these decades so far, I would probably say that the 2000s is above the 90s to me. I don't know. There's something about the 90s I just wasn't that big of a fan of. But I feel like the 2000s definitely got things back on track. I just don't think the 2000s is quite as good as the 70s nor the 80s, just because the highest of the highs when it comes to the 70s and the 80s just can't be touched in retrospect. That's just really what it comes down to. But I think the 2000s is really good, really solid. It was just really consistent overall. Like I said, there wasn't really peaks and valleys too much. It was just pretty straight across the board. Like almost everything was like right around the beat, like a 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, y'all comment that down below, what you think of the 2000s horror. If you made it this far and you're new to the channel, go ahead and subscribe to your boy. We're on the road to 10K subs. And no matter how many times YouTube for some reason won't push my videos out like that, it doesn't matter. I'm gonna still keep dropping that content for y'all because y'all already know. Like the video, subscribe, and Spooky Gang, until next time, y'all stay blessed and y'all stay spooky.